Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Audit Committee of Hertfordshire County Council, today, the 8th of December 2020. I'm Frances Button, and I'm delighted to be chairing it today. I have an announcement to make relating to COVID-19 and the attendance at this meeting. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, the Council will be holding this meeting electronically in accordance with the relevant regulations. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in an electronic capacity, and there's a link on the Council's website for them to do so. Members of the Council are asked to keep their microphones switched off until called to speak, and to switch their microphones on and to switch their microphones off again once they've finished speaking. Cameras may be left on throughout the meeting if members wish. If you experience connection or other technical issues, it may help to switch your camera off. Cameras should be switched on if and when speaking in the meeting. To indicate a wish to speak, members should use the raise hand function. Use of the meeting chat function is exclusively for voting. At the end of the debate on each item of business, there'll be a vote. Members should vote using the meeting chat function by indicating for, against, or abstain. I will declare the result after each vote. Breaks of at least 15 minutes will be held every 2 hours and will be taken after a speaker in the debate has finished speaking. If we're voting, the vote will be concluded before the break is taken, and other breaks will be incorporated as appropriate. So we move on to the meeting. Membership changes, there are none. Apologies, again, happily, there are none. So I'm going to invite members to introduce themselves, and I'll just go back to me. I'm Frances Button. I'm the County Councillor for Rickmansworth East and Oxley Park. Simon, would you like to lead us off now?
Hello, I'm Simon Bloxham, County Councillor for Letchworth North.
Thank you. John Graham.
Good morning. I'm John Graham, County Councillor for Potters Bar East and Vice Chairman of Audit.
John Hale.
Good morning, I'm John Hale, County Councillor for Coney Heath and Marshalswick.
Ian Ray.
Good morning, I'm Ian Ray, I'm the member for Berkhamsted.
Sharon Taylor.
Chair, Sharon's having some trouble getting into the meeting.
Oh, I'm here. Good morning, Francis. Good morning, members. I'm Sharon Taylor. I'm the County Councillor for Bedwell Division in Stevenage, and I'm the Labour spokesperson on Finance and Resources.
Thanks, Sharon. Tim Williams.
Good morning, everybody. It's Tim Williams here, County Councillor for the Stanborough Woodside Division in the North Watford area.
William Wyatt-Lowe.
I'm William Wyatt-Lowe. I represent Hemel Hempstead Town. Good morning, everybody.
And we don't often get two people with surnames following William, but John Wiley. John Wiley is joining now, but I'm not sure he's on yet, but we'll come back to John in a minute. Paul Zukowski.
Good morning, my name's Paul Zukowski. I'm the County Councillor for Hatfield South, and I'm the Deputy Leader of the Opposition Group on the County Council.
And I'm not sure John Wiley is in yet, but I have a little note to say he's joining now. I'm confident when he comes in, we'll just ask him to introduce himself. So as we move on, my announcements. Actions from the minutes of the 15th of October meeting were circulated by email prior to this meeting. So we then move on to the minutes. I'm going to invite members to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of October. Are you happy to confirm those? Please, could we vote now? So I'm just looking as the votes are coming in, and I'm assuming officers are going to tell me in just a minute that that's been agreed. Thank you. Yes, I think that's all been agreed. So let's move on to item 2. This is the Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Authority Statement of Assurance 2019 to 2020. So that means for the year really pretty much before COVID hit us particularly badly. So it ends March earlier this year. And I think we've got Chris Bigland, Deputy Chief Fire Officer, here to introduce it. And I'm just going to mention, I'm confident that all of the members will have read all the reports. So I'm asking officers to give quite a brief positional statement, as a situational statement as to where we are, but to expect that we've all, as I said, read the report. Chris Bigland.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So I'll try and keep it brief, Chair. The Statement of Assurance is appended to the cover paper. As members will be aware, we are required under the national framework to create and publish a Statement of Assurance for Fire and Rescue, but as you will know, we are covered under the Herts County Council Annual Statement of Assurance, and so this is an additional document to support that. In terms of performance, we report the annual performance of the service to members, and that is a detailed look at performance and is separate to this. And so this document, I hope, will give you, or what we believe will give you, substantial assurance around us running the fire and rescue service, and give you enough of a headline across a number of themes to evidence that. Members on a previous session made reference and suggested that it would be helpful to have the metrics all measuring in the same way, and so you'll see throughout the document that the metrics are year to last year comparators, and so we've improved the consistency of the reporting to highlight the work that we're doing. And I'm happy to take questions and cover off any of the specifics, but just to give you a few highlights, if I may, Chair. In terms of responses to incidents, we are showing an improvement, and the types of calls are reducing. So you'll see positives around number of fire incidents, number of road traffic collisions. It is the art of the small numbers. I have to be absolutely transparent and honest about that. You'll see specifically, if you like, within injuries, we are only talking about one different to the year before. But we are lucky enough, and we work very hard to reduce all incident types, and that's why we're talking about the art of small numbers. In terms of other aspects of our work, just to highlight in terms of our appliances attending fires and incidents, we are performing well. The outlier will be, you'll see in the report, is our third appliance attendance standard, which is close but doesn't quite meet our target. And that is exactly why we're looking at our integrated risk management plan to try alternate vehicles to allow us to test different response types to hit our target and meet the standard that we set ourselves. Just a few headlines, Chair, but happy to take questions on anything.
And as you know, I spotted that the sickness absence didn't add up to 100% on both the short-term and the longer-term sickness absence.
Thank you, Chair. Well reminded. So yes, indeed. And so this is data that's taken from SAP, and it doesn't capture active sickness. It only records when sicknesses are closed. And so that is why you'll see in the report there that it doesn't add up to 100% if you look at the two columns together, and that's because it's taking the data from the system. Happy to work with HR colleagues to improve the metrics for the future, but specifically around that question of the numbers, it's relating to incidents of sickness which haven't been closed on the system. But what I can report, if I may, Chair, is the fact that we've worked quite closely with audit colleagues, and you will see in this year's data a marked improvement and reduction in sickness.
Thank you very much for that information. Now, I haven't quite got the gist of the order in which hands went up, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to do them in the order in which I've spotted them. I saw Tim's first, but whether that's right, I don't know. Then I saw John Hale, then I saw Sharon, and then I saw John Graham. And meanwhile, I'm pleased to say that John Wiley has been able to join the meeting, and we'll ask him to say a few words at the end of this item. So if you're happy with that order, Tim first, Tim Williams.
Thank you, Francis. Just a quick question to Chris there. I know in his opening remarks there he mentioned about smaller alternative vehicles. I know that sort of came in about a year or so ago sort of thing, and it was on a trial basis. How's that trial going, and how will that affect your response times?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the trial is still being established. We haven't got those light vehicles, so I've reported in other committees that due to COVID pressures, supply chain has been slowed down, and so we haven't received those vehicles yet. But the service is working to implement the trial for alternate vehicles as part of the IRMP. So the straight answer is we haven't yet started the on-the-ground trial. As soon as we have the vehicles, we will do that, and then we'll be reporting to the various panels, particularly our own Community Safety and Waste Management panel, as to the progress of that project, as the data is known to us.
So okay. Just sorry, Francis, if I could come back. Just what sort of time frames are you looking at now?
Yeah, great question. So I would like to say that we will be underway into 2021. I would hope to have a vehicle in April, but that is a hope, Councillor. That's not an absolute confirmed position, because I still have to work. We still have to work with suppliers to make sure that we can get those vehicles. And of course, we've got different parts of the country and different tier settlements, and so we are beholden to the supply chain. My hope is April.
Thanks, John Hale next.
Thank you, Chair. Chris, a couple of questions. One, picking up on what you just said about the one metrics you were a bit behind on, which is the third vehicle. Is there any extent to which that's the law of small numbers, and there are relative, how many incidents require 3 vehicles? And then the second one is, obviously, since the period covered by this report, I know you've had a challenging 9 months. But I think, as this committee, when we're looking at our reports, we have to look at, post-report issues. Has there been any significant? I'm trying to think. Yes, there's been a significant event, but my observation from our discussions is that the Fire and Rescue Service has responded very well to that. But are there any things that's happened since the end of March that this committee should be aware of that would reflect on the contents of this report?
Great questions. Okay, so in terms of the small numbers piece, you're absolutely right. We are talking tens of incidents, which has, as we all know in statistics, has a peculiar effect then when we're talking about very, very small numbers on the percentage. So I thank you for acknowledging or bringing that question to the table, because that's exactly the case. We are, into tens of incidents as opposed to hundreds, etc. And so it is disproportionately affected. And so it's important for us to want to meet the target, but it is a very small number. So I hope that gives you some background around that. And secondly, thank you for acknowledging the hard work of the service in challenging times. In terms of what have we prospered or learned from both the process and the reporting, and where would we take it to? Absolutely, that it's around and it's captured in the future improvement section at the rear of the document. And I know you know that, but just to link those conversations together, this is around that prevention and protection work that we have to embark upon as continuous improvement. And it links to things like Grenfell and our own incidents that we've had in county, which require us to work more intrusively, shall we say, into some of that protection work. And that again is reflected in the quantitative data that we put in the report, because of course, as we see our fire crews doing more fire protection work, it generates more complex cases for our fire protection specialists, which then reduces their output because they're spending more time on specific cases, which then links into future improvements in terms of how do we do that business more effectively with more demand.
Okay, thank you for that. Sharon Taylor next.
Thank you, Chair. And it's amazing to see the breadth of work set out in this report. We're very grateful to you and your team, Chris, for that, and particularly to Daryl for not only doing that, but leading on the response to COVID as well. So thank you for that. I've got a couple of questions. I wanted to just add to John's question really about the impact of COVID and what sort of impact you feel that's had on the level of requests from the public for your service. Has it been more because people have been at home or less? My second question was around a report which went to the Community Safety and Waste Management panel, which was around implementing a trial to restrict the attendance of automatic fire alarms. Now, I know you've had something like, if I'm right in my information, about a 12% reduction in staff since 2010, around 101 staff less than you had back in 2010. Is that material to having to reduce this attendance at automatic fire alarms, and is that likely to be a permanent change? The next question was, is there any chance of being able to return in the future to the standard crewing model of five firefighters per crew instead of 4? And my last question, forgive me for lots of questions, Chair. It was a very interesting report, so lots to talk about. My last question was around, we know there are lots and lots of people now who are living in flat blocks, particularly in high-rise flat blocks, who are very concerned, not just about cladding, but about other fire safety issues. And I wondered what the impact of that has been on your team, Chris, in terms of responding to the concerns people have. Obviously, I get a lot of correspondence, particularly from leaseholders who are in many cases faced with huge bills for this. But my question for you is are you seeing that increasing concern from people who are living in high-rise buildings for other issues, not just cladding, you know, the other fire safety issues? Thank you, Chair.
Well, there we go, Chris. That's a list for you.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Councillor. Where to start? Okay, so in terms of the call levels that we've been receiving during the COVID period, that's relatively easy to deal with. The incident pattern has shifted slightly, without a doubt, as people change their locations, but actually we're not seeing a huge difference in terms of the numbers. Without being too detailed, if I can explain that where we see people on lockdown but able to travel, the roads are quieter. Unfortunately, some people take that as a green light, forgive the pun, to drive faster, and so we are still attending road traffic collisions, but they are different in their nature by the speed involved. And I think if I can leave that there, you can probably take from that what I'm trying to say. And in terms of incidences of fire, unfortunately, you know, as we know, and it's a statement of fire and rescue services across the country, fire doesn't discriminate, it doesn't understand that there's a pandemic on, it still happens. I think the important bit for us as a service, and I'm really grateful that you acknowledged both Daryl's contribution and also the wider services, because actually we've been turning our hands to other things, whether it's delivering prescription medicine, whether it's been supporting the vulnerable, whether it's doing vulnerable checks. We've done over 1,000 vulnerable checks using firefighters, going out and checking on people in the community, just to make sure they're all right, don't need anything. Our intelligence teams, information and data teams have been supporting Op Shield to help at least understand where those people are that might need our help. So there is a huge, PAN Council and all other agencies commitment to getting this right, and I'm really proud to say Fire are stepping up and doing their bit too. So just thank you for acknowledging that, really, Councillor. Let's move on to some of the other bits, if that's okay. So in terms of the automatic fire alarm piece, it's not at all related to numbers of firefighters. Very happy to share the data with you on the Hertfordshire picture. It's slightly different to, I think, what's been reported in the press. So very happy to share the data with our actual figures. But in terms of, is that related to our policy around AFAs? No, it's absolutely not. This, for us, is around an evolution of something that's been developed over time. So for a number of years now, we haven't been attending commercial premises during the opening hours, so the business hours. services out of the 45 that have been much more intrusive in their policy development, or progressive, or however you choose to describe it, where actually they've stopped attending a number of automatic fire alarm types, and we are restricting our and it is a trial, by the way, we are restricting our trial to offices and retail. And of course, we're only looking to do offices at the moment because actually most people are working from home still, or transitioning between the two. So it's the lowest area of risk possible to understand whether this is an appropriate channel for us. So it is a trial. We are focusing around two particular types. It's absolutely not related to numbers of firefighters. I can provide the data that you talk about to show you what the Hertfordshire picture actually looks like, which is slightly different to what's been reported. And as far as we're concerned, this is about ensuring we reduce road risk by not having fire appliances moving with purpose and intent when they don't need to be. It is about protecting productivity and allowing us to do other activity. We are talking about, evenings and night times, but we are a changing economy. We do have industries that work through the night. We do have training and exercising. So if we want to shut a tunnel, like on the A1M, to do exercising and training, can't do it during the day. So this allows us to go and do those things, which otherwise we'd have been distracted and pulled away from, when actually we can be more intelligent about the way in which we respond to those incident types in a very specific way, whilst we understand the trial, and then we can make some decisions on the data at the end of that period, which is likely to be 12 months. So hopefully that helps with the AFA piece. In terms of our 5 riders position, that's part of the integrated risk management plan, as members will know. We are working through the process of the IRMP, and I've reported at other panels that that piece around 5 riders and 4 riders is linked into the next phase of the integrated risk management plan. It has been agreed. It is a position that we advocate for. But it's important that what we don't lose is weight of attack. So when we go back to the data that we've talked about this morning in terms of first, second and third vehicle attendance times, that's how we make up the weight of attack for each incident type. And so if I can still provide the right number of firefighters to deal with the tasks that they have to deal with, it doesn't matter if they come on 1, 2, 3 fire engines, and I can then have those units out being more productive individually in their non-emergency phase work, but still available to come together for the emergency phase activity. So it's a very big set of interdependencies to make sure that we are the most efficient and the most effective as we can be for all of the risk-based inspections, education, training, but then coming together to do the actual operational response. So we still advocate and recommend the course of action that we're taking around ridership, and we will ensure that the right number of firefighters are mobilised to each incident type to ensure safety and the best effect for those people that are having a bad day, quite frankly. So I hope that helps in terms of the 5 riders piece. And then, if I've got it right, the final piece, Councillor, was around high-rise and cladding and concerns in that field of work. And so we have very few buildings within Hertfordshire that suffer from this particular question, shall we say, and where we do have those buildings, we are supporting individual, whether they, predominantly the building owner, but I absolutely recognise your point, because of course we get the leaseholder concern, and what we have said all along is come and talk to us. So there's a couple of buildings, not within your patch, Councillor Taylor, but there are some buildings where the service is actively having a conversation with leaseholders. And I know there are some buildings closer to you that clearly are of interest. And so it's important we work with the borough or district council in terms of a housing concern, but then also with the owners, and we do talk to the leaseholders. And what we also try to do is funnel that through National Fire Chiefs Council into a government position, so we can then have best effect both locally and nationally at policy level. So those conversations are ongoing. I don't see any specific alarming concern or an increase in concern. I see the same amount of concern as we have pretty much consistently, and I think that's because of the amount of buildings of this type that we have not being at the higher end of the scale like some of our neighbours perhaps.
So can I just say thank you to Chris for the work they've done with the Borough Council here on reassuring those in our high-rise blocks. We have put in a sprinkler programme, as Chris will know, and that's being stepped up now. We had a slight hold up because of COVID, and we're really grateful for your support in that, Chris, and your team. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Right, so thank you very much. So we now move on to John Graham, and then after John, I've got William who will want a word. John.
Yes, Chairman, thank you very much, Stephen. And Chris, thank you for your report, which is I found fascinating and full of detail, and I think that's been evidenced by the number and quality of questions that you've had on it. If I could just raise one area that fascinated me with the number of fires, and interesting, how do you predict the number of fires? And the follow-up question, really, obviously 1920 the fires are down. Are we seeing a trend downwards? Is this a continuing trend in downwards fires? Because clearly the targets you set for last year were significantly higher. But I'd just be interested in how we anticipate and predict fires.
Great, thank you for the question. So there's probably two things to mention here. So because Fire and Rescue have had a prevention approach to everything for the best part of 20-something years, ever since I joined the service. We absolutely have strived to drive down the number of incidents across the board and spent quite a huge amount of time and effort in our preparatory work in doing safe and well visits or home safety visits, as you may recall them, fitting smoke alarms, etc. So over a 10-year period, we have halved fire fatalities and incidents in the UK. And we were at the point, I think, Councillor, where we were starting to see a bit of a plateau. I think we've had a couple of strange years in terms of data, because of course we're now into this COVID phase, and we've talked about it already that fire doesn't discriminate, but people's behaviours and patterns does change. So I don't think we can take too much from looking at trend and analysis for this most recent period, because it's not a normal period. But over a 10-year period, we've halved the number of fatalities and incidences of fire across the UK. If I then bring it to the main question, I think, Councillor, which is this piece around how do we then work out what our metrics are and what's our projection. So some time ago, we may have taken an approach where actually we look at each year and we try and take a percentage off, but actually in terms of being scientific about it, what we have implemented and did this about 5 years ago, maybe a bit longer, is we take a 5-year trend. So when we look at the 5-year trend, we look at what the data is telling us, and that's how we plot our line for the next year's projection and intention. Because to apply an arbitrary figure of what's going to do 2% less doesn't really report the scientific evidence and how we can sensibly move the organisation forward in a continuous reduction curve. So that's where we are. It's a 5-year piece. That's how we plot our targets for the following years. And of course, we react to different legislation and environmental effects.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. Very helpful.
Thank you. And then William Wyatt-Lowe.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Chris. I just got one very simple question for you. Apart from putting out fires quickly and your work on preventing fires in the first place, what other contributions can you make to our carbon reduction targets?
Oh, good question. Lots, I should think. Again, very small things in terms of the question that was posed earlier about the automatic fire alarms. Actually, if we can reduce the amount of travel that we have to do for no reason or for limited reason, then actually we can start reducing our carbon footprint by reducing vehicle movements. We are absolutely part of the sustainability group for Herts County Council. Chief plays a champion role in that, and we lead by example. So we are looking at moving our officer cars, all of our blue light fleet that isn't fire engines, into electric. So we're working on that. Every single one of our building projects, all of our capital programs. So colleagues and members will know that we are in the process of redeveloping Hertford as a fire station. We are intending on doing work around our training environment. And each of those schemes will have to have carbon reduction and sustainability factors placed on it. And so we are absolutely keen to lead by example, whether it's photovoltaics, whether we're thinking about reusable energy. all of those things add up to fire and rescue making a contribution to reduce our impact and actually help in terms of being ambassadors for implementing green energy and green solutions.
Thank you so much. I haven't spotted anybody else's hand up. Chris, perhaps the range of questions has indicated to you the enormous interest we have in the fire and rescue service, but also the huge support that you have from members. And I think we're all joining together to thank you so much, and to thank Darrell Keane as well for his particular role in everything you've done to help keep us safe. I particularly liked the information you've given us on carbon reduction initiatives. Halving the number of fatalities over the last 10 years, you can be very proud of that. We haven't talked much about the switch from the number of fires that you fight to the traffic collisions, and the fact that the volume of business, if I can use that commercial phrase, the volume of business that you do is strongly switching towards traffic collision support. So thank you so much. And I think all we have to do, and I say that, I don't mean to say it lightly, we accept your report, I think. So can I invite all members to vote, please? And I'm looking for a little thing to say. There we go. Good. I'm definitely expecting this to be unanimous. And the votes are just coming through. Agreed. Right. So thank you, Chris. Thank you very much indeed. And please convey to the whole service the grateful thanks of the Audit Committee for everything that you do.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks to everyone for their kind comments. Thank you.
Now, I'm just briefly going to invite John Wiley to introduce himself. John, I'm sorry you had IT issues right at the beginning, but if you'd just like to introduce yourself, that would be good.
Yeah, good morning, Chairman, and apologies for being late. My name is John Wiley. I am the Councillor for Bishop Stortford East, and I will disappear now and listen intently, and if I have any questions, you'll see me again. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you. So we now move on to item 3, and we've got several reports on our audit. So firstly, we're looking at the audit results report. We've got Suresh Patel and Natalie Clark, I think both from Ernst Young, and I think Suresh is the associate partner. You're going to introduce this, and welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thank you, Francis. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. I'm going to struggle to follow obviously the interest that you had in the fire and rescue service, but at least I can say that we were very pleased to be able to sign your accounts on the 30th of November, which allowed you to publish your accounts by the target date, which you probably know wasn't the position for a number of local authorities up and down the country. I think the statistics were 55% were able to publish their accounts by the end of November, 45% weren't. So I think that's a reflection of what I said at the last committee meeting back in October, of what a challenging year it has been for both the preparers of accounts and the auditors. And I think the reason why we were able to issue your opinion by the due date was, again, just reiterating what I said before, but it's worth reiterating. I think we've engaged effectively together as an audit team and a finance team in terms of planning and addressing some of the risk areas that we've talked about before in terms of valuations, pensions, etc. I think that collaborative approach and the kind of joint effort has then paid dividends, and ultimately I think we've been very effective both sides in terms of being open and frank about where we were with things and what we needed to do to resolve matters. So like I say, I'm very pleased to be able to say that we were able to issue your audit opinion in the due time. Because obviously we reported the detail to you back in October, we weren't planning to spend a lot of time on the audit results report, but there was a couple of things I just wanted Natalie just to update you on, and then we'll take questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So on page 8 of the report, which is page 48 of the pack, this is part of our executive summary, and we just had a couple of points on this page just to draw out. So the pensions liability section sets out that we had 2 unadjusted differences which were linked to the reporting from the pension fund side of the audit. These were linked to a drop in investment values around the year end due to COVID-19, and in line with our expectations, the council didn't amend for those unadjusted differences which were identified, and that's in line with our expectations and discussions with the finance team. At the bottom of that page 8 or page 48 is the going concern disclosure section. This just sets out that we've concluded our work in respect to this area, which was outstanding when we reported in October, and just to confirm that we had no modifications to our opinion in respect of this work, so we're able to conclude that adequately with the information that was provided. So as Suresh said, we're happy to take questions on the report.
Thank you very much. And I haven't at the moment. Yes, I have. Tim Williams has his hand up first. Tim.
Thank you very much, Francis, and thank you very much, Natalie and Suresh. Do want to open up the original with a comment regarding well done to the Ernst & White audit team, and well done to the Herts County Council's finance team for doing so well, for meeting the deadlines, meeting the guidelines, and for positively having a great collaboration over the last few months on the audit. My question here, and I think it's only a double check question, on page 73, second paragraph down, the whole government accounts. Understand this was to be concluded last week, and I appreciate it is always at the end of the audit session, but has that all been issued, certified and sent out now?
Natalie, do you want to give an update, please?
Yep, so we will update this in the next agenda item as well in relation to the annual audit letter. Due to an IT issue with the system, we haven't been able to conclude this work as the council haven't been able to submit their final submission on, and we haven't therefore been able to complete our assurance statement. The latest information on this is that a fix is being put in place, and this is hoping to be concluded by the 18th. We'll obviously liaise with the council as soon as this fix occurs, and if they're able to present that information to us, we'll then audit the final version as soon as possible, and that will then allow us to issue our certificate and close the audit for the 1920 year.
Just to reiterate, it's a national issue.
Yeah.
So it's affecting all authorities.
Thank you. Sharon Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, and yeah, well done to our finance team. These auditing in these days is much more complicated than it would have been 12 months ago, and we all understand the difficulties. My question is more of a general one than a specific one around the detail of the audit, Chair, and it relates to the paragraphs on Agenda Pack page 58 or page 18 of the audit report, and it's about the going concern judgment, and you refer in that paragraph at the top of that page to current and future uncertainty over government funding and other sources, and a need for the authority to undertake a detailed going concern assessment as an ongoing thing. I'm interested in that because there must be so much uncertainty around how the impact of COVID is going to impact, how the Brexit issues may impact on our finances, and you know, what looks like a looming recession as well. And I'm interested in your judgment on that and how that impacts on how it's impacted on your audit assessment this year, and what you'll be looking for next year from audit in terms of those judgments that are being made. I think anyone trying to set a budget for any part of local government this year needs a crystal ball for setting our budgets from February onwards, because we just don't know so much about the funding from government, about the other funding that might be available, or the impact of COVID and Brexit. So can you just give me a bit more information about how you look at that ongoing concern issue? Thank you.
I think that's a good question. So in terms of the assessment that we expect you to make, it's about what we consider to be reasonable. As you say, given the uncertainty, it's about what assumptions are you then making around things like falls in income on revenue streams that you would normally have in your budget. So if you're assuming a 20% reduction in car parking revenue, well, why is it 20%? Why is it not 50%? What would happen if it was 50%? So we do a number of challenges on the assumptions that you've made to arrive at a judgment that judgment feels reasonable. And it's fair to say that over the last 6 months, given that we've been doing these assessments across the country, we ourselves have got a better idea now what we consider to be reasonable, because obviously we can compare and contrast what different authorities are assuming, and there is clearly a certain level of commonality in terms of those assumptions. So by adopting that challenge to what you are assuming, and then looking at the kind of forecast, we're able to come to a conclusion overall. Is that a reasonable assessment that you've made, and then are you disclosing adequately the output of that assessment? So we're not looking for a precise figure, we are looking for what is reasonable, and clearly that has an element of judgment in it, which we obviously sort of make at the end of the day. But we do challenge management, and I'm sure Scott and his team can confirm that to understand the basis of the assumptions that you're making. So I think in terms of next year, I think this assessment now is not going to go away anytime soon, and I think what you've done for this year clearly stands you in good stead for next year, because you'll build on what you've already done, and similarly our audit of that assessment clearly will build on what we've done this year. So it probably won't feel as challenging as it was for this year, but it still will be part of the audit.
Thank you. And now I'm going to call John Graham.
Chairman, thank you very much indeed, and thank you to both Suresh and we're going to hear from Stephen in a minute on bringing the accounts and the audit together. And it's good to hear Suresh talking about the collaborative approach on both sides to what's been done. I think we have to congratulate our finance team for getting the accounts together. And in commenting on my assessment of how the audit's gone, I draw some evidence from my own district. Whereas finance portfolio holder, I've experienced EY as well in a different side. We have had a deferral this year from the end of July to the end of November, and it's good to see that we were one of the 55% that got signed. But I am aware, I think my challenge on EY is on that extension, how both sides have used those extra months to in terms of the audit and the accounts. I mean, the comment from my district is that EY have almost generated an industry of asking extra questions. And I do know that although the accounts were signed off on the November 30th, which was a Monday, I think our finance team was still answering your questions right up almost to the Friday night. So I think there's been quite a degree of frustration, and I think some of that area that's challenging for me on the delay is that a lot of it has been estimates that we had in July that were in the accounts and ready to go have then been questioned again as we've got the extension. So if I understand correctly, the actuary's IAS report has been reissued to take account of the McLeod judgment, which effectively was announced after or very close to the deadline that we've had. So I think it's good to hear there's been collaborative, but I think there's been a frustration, certainly on the finance side, of how this audit has been closed out. I do, so at the same time, I do have sympathy with you, because when we look on page 5, that some of your professional people you rely on, like Rick's, walked away from the valuations almost on day one. It does put you in a difficult position, and I know it's been a difficult year to be an auditor. But I hope that next year we can get these accounts through in a more efficient fashion. And it does raise issues of extension, because we come on to an item later on the Redmond review that's talking about that 2 months extension. And my concern, my response to that is it depends how well and how efficiently both sides use that 2 months. But otherwise, well done for getting the accounts through, and thank goodness we were one of the 55%.
Suresh, I don't know whether you want to make a comment on that, because obviously I'm expected to be a little bit closer to this as chairman of the committee. I'm afraid I do endorse John's concerns about the pressure that our finance team have been under to meet the very late questions, and huge hats off to our team for doing that. And I'm grateful to you for mentioning the spirit of cooperation, because obviously we need to work together really well, and it's great that on a personal level we do have that relationship. But I welcome your comments.
Yeah, I think in terms of the queries that we were asking in November, they were largely to do with your going concern assessment, which wasn't prepared until quite late in that period. So I think we only got a cash flow forecast, for example, and I'm looking at Natalie, sometime in November. And because, as we had told officers, we had to go through a consultation process internally, we needed those queries on things like the cash flow statement before we could do that consultation process. And then we had queries coming out of that consultation process. So we could have done that earlier if we'd have had that assessment earlier, which would have meant we wouldn't have had those late queries. But I take the point that the longer the period is to conduct the audit, the more likely it is you will have queries coming out at a later date. And that's because the audit doesn't just conclude on a specific date. We obviously have to make sure we've got appropriate assurance. So the IS19 one is a classic example of the McLeod judgment, which clearly, or the consultation came out after you prepare the accounts, but because the period of audit was still open, it couldn't be ignored and you had to reflect on it, so which is what you did.
I'm grateful to you for that, but the really good news is that we met the deadline of the 30th of November, so huge thanks to EY and to all of our team, and well done everybody. And we have an unqualified report, so thank you for that. So I'm going to move to the recommendation that we note the audit results report. Could everybody vote, please? And I'm rather assuming this one's going to be unanimous as well. I just haven't seen a little note yet to say that the voting... thank you. I've just spotted the note. So now let's move on to item 4, which is the annual audit letter. And I think everybody should also have received an appendix which was sent through afterwards, which was called 4A. So that won't be, I don't think, included in the, if you're working from the pack that the public access were given to, you might need to search around and go and find 4A separately. This came through really, really quite late, didn't it? So I think I'm going to invite, yes, Suresh Patel again to report on this one.
Thank you, Chair. So this, just for those of who might be unfamiliar, the annual audit letter is a requirement that in effect summarises the output of the most recent audit. Typically, we would issue this a couple of months after we finished the audit, but obviously, given the timing of the 1920 accounts, we agreed with officers that we would try and squeeze it into today's committee because it was obviously relevant to what we've just been talking about. So apologies for the fact that we've tabled it late, but we thought it just made sense to kind of then close off the 1920 audit rather than going into next year and reporting. So I mean, in essence, it obviously summarises what we've just reported on in terms of the detail in the annual audit report. So we're not planning to go into any detail at all. But there was just, well, we've already picked up the WGA point about the fact that that's delayed until HM Treasury put in place that IT fix. And then I just wanted Natalie to talk about the fees page, and I just wanted to then touch on the value for money conclusion change for next year. So Natalie.
Yep, so section 8 of this report, so page 20 of the report, which obviously is its own section outside of the pack. This sets out our calculation of additional fees in relation to the audit work for 2019-20, and we'll be providing some further detail to officers in relation to the breakdown behind these fees, hopefully this week or early next week, and enter into discussions with the management in relation to this. Following that, the fee is then submitted to the public sector audit appointments for final approval at the end of that. But the detail is set out there on page 20 in terms of our initial calculations. So happy.
And then just the only other thing on that letter, yeah, we're just on page 17, which goes on to page 18. I'll just give you a heads up in terms of the change in the NAO's code for 2021. And the main change is really around value for money. So we've outlined there what those changes are. The biggest change you will see really is how we report on value for money. So up until now, it's been a fairly kind of binary conclusion in your audit report. So either qualified or unqualified. For 2021, the NAO has put in a requirement that we will now be providing a commentary on value for money. So the 3 bullets at the bottom of page 17, so financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy efficiency and effectiveness, we will provide a commentary of the council's arrangements against those 3 criteria. And our risk assessment will be a little bit more detailed in terms of risks against those 3 areas. I think it probably links into the earlier question about going concern assessment, because you can see obviously financial sustainability is clearly a direct link to that. So you can probably expect to see more reporting on value for money than you have in the past. Other than that, Chair, we're happy to take questions on the annual audit letter.
Thank you very much. And I can see John Hale has his hand up, but I'm going to make a quick comment. I know there have been concerns over the size of the increase, the proposed increase in fees. So I'm just going to ensure that we are quite clear. If we note your report, we are not accepting the fee proposal. I think that's terribly important. Thank you for drawing to our attention the value for money changes coming through from next year. John Hale. John, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and to a certain extent, it's picking up on some questions and comments from the item prior to this about going concern, and also on Natalie's comments on page 20 of the report, because the thing I noted in reviewing the report was the relatively significant sum in there for going concern. And I was concerned prior to this meeting as to how such a relatively large amount had been incurred when it should be something that is part of the normal procedure year on year, although I would accept this has been a difficult year. And also picking up, audit regulations tend to accrete, every now and then the one or other of the multiple regulators we have adds another regulation without actually necessarily thinking about how it can be built into the existing requirements. But I think what you've just been talking about, value for money, etc., I hope that you will be talking with our officers as early as possible in calendar year 2021 about how as much work as possible on value for money and going concern can be done before we get to March, and avoid these costs and additional questions coming in right at the end of the meeting, the process.
Thank you for your question. Suresh, do you want to comment, or shall we move on?
Is the question about why the fee is what it is for going concern?
Well, I'm sure you'll go into detailed discussions with the officers, but I would like some assurance that as a firm, you are looking at how you can streamline the approach to value for money and going concern, which I see as very much related. They're all about how efficient and productive is the council, to make sure that we don't end up where you spend the last month of the audit process looking forward, when that should perhaps be something that is done throughout the year and is done by the council throughout the year.
And so I can confirm that we will be doing that, and we will also be, looking to officers to prepare their assessment on going concern early as well, as you say, so we can both look at that before March and actually then reduce the amount of work we need to do once you've prepared your accounts. Yes.
Okay, so thank you for that. I see no more questions, so I'm going to invite members to vote. And again, we are noting the final annual audit letter for the year ended 31st March. And we're watching these come through, and again, I'm expecting that it will be pretty much unanimous, but I think I probably have to wait for that while we turn on to page 5. Right, so we've got the vote. Thank you, that's agreed then. So if we then turn to agenda item 5, and I think we're now on agenda pack page 91. So item 5 is the County Council's response to the audit results. And Scott Walker. Scott, are you going to introduce this one for us briefly? Hopefully it's quite straightforward.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as you say, it is quite a straightforward report, and a lot of the issues included in item 5, our response, were the same ones reported last committee, so I won't reiterate the same points again. I think there was 2 notable changes, both relatively minor. There was some income sampling which was misstated, which we haven't adjusted for, which was agreed with our auditors. And the other change was we thought the restated IAS 19 pensions report, due to McLeod in the majority, we didn't think we were going to restate that, but we did in the end in the account. So they were the 2 main changes since the last edition was reported to see. In the report, we have listed out all of our audit adjustments in Appendix A, and we've also got the 2 letters of representation that have been signed for the council and for the pension fund in the appendices. But I didn't want to highlight anything further on the report. As I say, a lot of it has been reported before. If they're happy to take any questions.
And I'm rather hopeful there will be no questions. I'm confident members. Oh, Tim, there we go. I was just going to say I'm confident members will have noted the exchange of letters as the appendices as well. Tim.
Yeah, sorry about that, Francis. Do have a couple of questions here. I was going to question on paragraph 4.5 on page 92, just in regards to the IAS 19. I know you mentioned that there, Scott. I understand the amount in question was £6 million here. And could the officer highlight the reasonings and basically the update from the McLeod case and the Goodwin case and any future impacts on future reports? And I also got the impression on appendices B and C that there were a lot more there are a lot longer letters, a lot more questions and queries on there. And I just wondered why these seemed a bit longer. Is it because what we discussed in the couple of items, that the audit has been a little bit more picky with a lot more questions due to the complexities and everything? Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, no, sure, happy to answer. So paragraph 4.5 is related to, in the main, so there were other changes as well, so we ran the IAS 19 pensions report. I think our actuary produced their estimates of what the liabilities were going to be in advance of some additional information that was published afterwards, and it was then judged that their calculation of the liability was actually greater than what would be once you use the more up-to-date information. So once we really looked at the recalculation of that in terms of our net liability, the total across the council was a £6 million change on our balance sheet figure, which actually in the context of a pension fund net liability is a relatively low percentage, but we just felt, just because of the nature of the change, it was worth re-entering into our accounts, so we then put that back through the accounts. In terms of future impacts, I'm sure we've said it before that hopefully we've known everything about the McLeod judgment, but again, I think a bit of a crystal ball. Hopefully nothing else changes, but I may be back in next year saying that we're talking about McLeod again. But fingers crossed, we are in a good position now, and understand that won't come up again. But never say never. I'm
going to pick up on Tim's phrase, and I'm quoting Tim. I don't often do this, Tim, so I hope that's okay. Tim has asked whether you thought the audit was a little bit more picky this year.
I think it's fair to say we've worked very well with the auditors this year, and it has been an exceptionally challenging year. In terms of the letter, which was this other point, wasn't it, about is it slightly longer? I think there are a couple of extra sections just because of COVID and how we've reported on that within it, so it is slightly longer. There's also a section on unadjusted errors, which are highlighted in the letters that are signed, so that does extend it slightly. I think it has been a challenging year. As always, there'll always be points we would do differently. So as Suresh mentioned, we'll work together to work out what the best way of approaching it is, and try and make it as streamlined as possible. And I think they've learnt lessons from it as much as we have, so hopefully it'll be a smoother and quicker process in future.
I think that's a really helpful response, particularly that I think we're all confirming it has been an exceptionally challenging year. So thank you again, our officers and EY, for all of the work that together you have achieved. And there's no doubt the good working relationship that we've had with EY over the years we have benefited enormously from it. So thank you very much. Now, Tim, your hand is still up. Do you want to come back, or have you just not taken it down? Fine. Okay. So thank you. And on that basis, let's move to voting on item 5. So that is noting and commenting on the report, which I think we have done. And I'm watching the votes come through again, and I'm assuming that one's going to be carried. I haven't had the little note yet to say that we have a majority, but I'm confident it will. So I'm already turning the pages to item 6, which is, I still haven't had confirmation. Yes, good. We have. That's agreed. Item 6, EY, additional. I still call you EY, but the heading is Ernst & Young. So perhaps, Suresh, you'd like to tell us what we should actually be calling you.
I think,
but this is the additional information items. So over to you.
Okay. Yeah, I think if you talk to our marketing people, they'll say EY because they've spent a lot of money branding us like that. So EY is probably the best thing to use. So these are just 2 items of information I thought were very useful for you as a committee to see. And I'll just take them together. So the first one is the Financial Reporting Council, who regulate all auditors, both private and public sector auditors. For the first time, have issued their report on the inspection of the work of local auditors. So that's audits of any entity that's covered by the NAO code. So that's largely local authorities, but also includes NHS entities. And they have been inspecting our work for the last probably about 5 or 6 years, but it's the first time they've actually published their report. And often, you might ask who kind of audits the auditors, and obviously it is the FRC. So I think it's useful for you to know that and to obviously see the output of what they've reported this year. From an EY perspective, we're very pleased to see that their inspection of our work for the last 2 years in particular has found no significant issues. So we've met their standards. And your kind of reference earlier to, was the audit more picky this year?
That was Tim, not me.
Honestly. No. But I think you'll find it's going to get even more picky as we go forward, because I think the FRC tends to kind of raise the bar each year. So you'll see reference there of items that they've identified across all firms that need to be improved on, whilst they have recognised some good practice from EY in respect of how we use our experts on valuations, for example, of properties. So we're pleased that our work, has met their standards, but the bar keeps getting raised each year, so we will keep looking to improve. But I just thought it's useful to see that for you and get assurance that the work that we're doing, whilst it's great that we've got that collaborative arrangement with your finance staff, is also being independently verified as meeting the standards I'm sure you would expect. So that's the FRC report. And then the second one is just a summary of the Redmond review, which I think I've trailed a number of committees because it's been going on probably for the last 18 months or so. And just a kind of an initial EY view on what we thought of the outcome. You'll see there's a number of recommendations in the detailed report, but probably the main one is about introducing a system regulator, I suppose, which some of you might remember the Audit Commission, and I think Redmond made it clear it doesn't expect the Audit Commission to be resurrected, but clearly there needs to be some entity that pulls together all the different aspects of the system. The fact that 45% of local authorities haven't published their accounts by the end of November this year is also probably a reflection of the difficulties within the system. So we support the introduction of a new system holder for that. There's also reference to maybe for changing the code around valuations of assets and pension liabilities, which we've also just been talking about quite a lot. we're a little less supportive of that because we don't think there should be a two-tier system in terms of how local authorities account for things and how the NHS accounts for things, for example. So that will need to be well thought through if it does happen. So I think but the overarching message I think really is that this is going to take time to be implemented, and it needs government action to actually change the audit and accounts regulations, to change the code. And at the moment, we're not seeing much of an appetite for that. So it might be some time before these recommendations are implemented. But again, I thought it was useful for you as a committee to be aware of what the Redmond review was actually saying. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. And you've made me reflect on another comment, which I'm just going to make, relating to all of our concerns about the fee increase. And it would be very interesting when you do send an analysis of the information through to our officers, how much of the increase that you're asking for relates to national issues, changes in national issues, and how much relates to what I'm going to call other, so i.e. Hertfordshire County Council related ones.
Yeah.
So that would be helpful. So thank you for that report. I've seen no questions. I think we've had a jolly good go. Sorry, I mustn't use the word jolly good go on looking at the finances. So can I invite members, please, to note the report? And while the votes are coming through, Suresh and Natalie, you'll both know that our item 7 is the mid-year report on the Treasury Management Service and prudential indicators. I don't know whether you'll want to contribute to this report, probably not, but you're most welcome to stay for it or to leave, whatever. But I'm probably not expecting you to want to spend the rest of the morning listening to the non-finance related items.
Thank you, Chair. We will drop off. I think I've got another meeting I need to be in about 5 minutes ago. So, okay.
Okay, fine. Thank you both very much indeed for coming along and advising us this morning. And thank you for everything you've done for us over the year.
Thank you.
So item 6 was agreed, and we now move to item 7, as I said, the mid-year report on the Treasury Management Service and prudential indicators. And the author was Matthew Nendink, but I think it's probably Patrick Towie, who's going to report. There we go, Patrick.
That's
over
correct,
to you.
Chairman. And morning to the rest of the members of the committee. Members will recollect that you receive a mid-year and end-of-year Treasury Management Activity Report. This is the mid-year report for the period April to September. It's a requirement that we provide these reports to this committee to summarise the activity of the Treasury function of finance. I'll take it as the report is read, but some salient points are that the council's complied with the prudential and treasury management indicators set out in the strategy. Council treasury investments are forecast to fall short of the budget for the year, and that's primarily due to the low yields on interest-bearing investments. The economic background is set out in section 5, and that has been quite challenging, and central banks have undertaken considerable activity to stimulate economic activity. And then the other sections, section 6, 7, give some more background to the actual performance indicators around the investments and borrowing. And section 8 is a sort of a regular piece on our outstanding Icelandic investments, and 3 of those have been closed off. The heritable investment has now been signed off by the administrators, and we have 1 outstanding investment now, and that is a KSF Countfing Singer and Friedlander. Section 10 gives some background on activity that we conduct for the Police and Crime Commissioner. We have a service level agreement with them to undertake their treasury activity. Happy to take any comments or questions from members of the committee.
And of course, we undertake treasury activities for the LEP as well, don't we?
That's correct, yes, Chairman.
Yes. and I noted that their reserves have gone up this year, which has to a certain extent concealed the fact that ours are very slightly down.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. Do we have any questions on this? I haven't seen any at all. Yes, I have. Tim Williams. Tim.
Thank you very much, Francis, and thank you, Patrick, for presenting the report there. I know it's probably a question that you might be able to shed some light on, but might not. But I note the government's Public Works Loan Board have increased their rate by 1% in October. And whilst rates are generally considered to be low, remaining low for a long time, just wonder if you've got any views why they actually put it up.
They did put it up, and this was in 2019. They've subsequently had HM Treasury have had a consultation, and as part of that consultation have revised that increase downwards back to where it was. But essentially the reason they put the rate up initially was because of some of the borrowing activity undertaken by a number of local authorities where they were borrowing to invest for yield. So they were buying properties and looking at alternative income streams, and they weren't borrowing to support services, so to speak. So that was the concerns of HM Treasury at the time, and so they increased that rate to deter borrowing. They've subsequently done a consultation. New regulations will come out which will curtail that type of borrowing, and the PWLB will not be permitted for those sort of transactions. And to reflect that, they've reduced that 1%. They've taken the 1% back down to where the margin was previously.
I think crystal ball gazing about PWLB, and yes, it was. Well, it was 14 months ago that it went up, wasn't it? And I think we've all noted in the report the impact on us of the very low interest rates, certainly significantly below what we'd anticipated when we set our budget. Now, Tim, thank you for the question. I've got Sharon and also Paul Zukowski. Sharon.
Thank you, Chair. And my question relates to the PWLB section of the report as well. And I've seen the very swinging new regulations that are proposed for PWLB borrowing, which do mean that if anywhere in your accounts you have been borrowing for yield, so it doesn't matter whether it's from the PWLB or not, you will be required to declare that to the PWLB, and in certain circumstances may be required to pay back any PWLB lending that you have, even if the lending that you got from them was not for the yield investments that you may have made. So I do think, you know, we've all got to, I don't know whether that impacts on the County Council or not, perhaps Patrick will tell me, but I do think we have to think very hard about this. There is a significant impact on many local authorities, bearing in mind that, you know, it wasn't very long ago that government were urging councils to do all they could to generate their own revenue for purposes of delivering services. Many councils have gone down this route, most of them not in an irresponsible way, although some have really pushed the boat out in terms of borrowing. I understand that, but they are few and far between. So authorities have borrowed to generate revenue for so that they can deliver their services. And now we've seen a kind of real big U-turn on this, and that really being frowned upon. And it could potentially leave many local authorities in a very difficult position if they are required to pay back money to the PWLB that they've borrowed. So this is not a straightforward picture, and I don't want it to sound as though it is. You know, there are very good reasons why authorities might want to borrow from the PWLB. I'm particularly passionate about ones that do that to support their own economy. So where they're borrowing, it might be for yield for them, but it might be in their own local economic area to generate jobs for their local area. So it's not a straightforward picture, and I do think we need a proper consultation with local government on these PWLB rules before they're imposed on us in a way that might be detrimental to many councils' revenue accounts.
I'm going to come in and make a comment here. This is a County Council Audit Committee, and we are reviewing and ensuring that we are satisfied with the County Council's processes and procedures in place. So whilst I absolutely recognise that for twin trackers, discussing the impact on other councils is really, really important. And I can see that you see this as an opportunity. Nonetheless, I don't want to go down the route of spending a long discussion on the impact on some of the districts and boroughs. We are looking at the county council at the moment. So Sharon, I think it was a very helpful
that was
comment.
my question. Sorry, that was my question, Chair, was whether there is an impact in that way on the county council's finances. I take it from Patrick's earlier comments there isn't, but I'd like to be reassured that that's the case.
Quite so. But I think I'm probably also saying if we can try and restrict our questions to focused questions as they relate to the county council, it might help us finish before lunch. I'm sure we will anyway. Because I've got a couple of other comments, Patrick, I'm going to hold back on that, and I'm going to invite Paul's question and John's question, and then perhaps you'd like to take them all together. Paul, next.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. The question I had related to table 9.6 and the commentary at 9.8, because I do note that the average interest rate on the borrowing that we're paying is, I would say, relatively high given the situation with national interest rates. And it says in 9.8 that that portfolio is kept under review. Are we locked into too many long-term high interest borrowing things without the opportunity for early repayment? Is that why we are facing quite as high an interest rate as we are? And could we have perhaps a little bit more detail on the efforts that are being made to try and reprofile that debt so that we can keep the revenue cost of that debt as low as possible?
Gosh, totally different from Sharon's question, and I rather expected yours to carry on to that. John, do you want to pop in your question as well, and then Patrick can do all three of them together, hopefully?
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you, but I take no pleasure in doing so, but I feel it's important that I do so on this occasion. One of the roles of this committee is to review the Council's Treasury Management function, in particular, review and monitoring Treasury Management arrangements in accordance with SIP for guidance, etc. And I think Sharon has raised a very important issue here on the Public Works Lending Body. And I think it would be very useful, if not today, at a future meeting in early next year, to have some guidance from the officers as to what impact, if any, they anticipate these changes in PLW rules will make on the County Council. So my question is a request that we have some further guidance from the officers on this matter as early as possible in 2021, because as Paul said, what our interest rates are and our ability to borrow is very significant. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And of course, when this happened back in October 2019, our officers were very helpful and did go through quite a lot of this information for us all. Now, it may well be that, so much has happened in the last 14 months. A refresher would be helpful. So, Patrick, there you go. One, on the impact on us of PWLB changes. And secondly, are we locked into long-term interest rates to our detriment? Over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. So with regards to the first question on the impact, the requirement going forward, my understanding is that the PWLB will ask for a lot more additional information around why you are borrowing and the borrowing, what sort of services you're borrowing. Is it for capital expenditure? Well, it's obviously for capital expenditure, but the types of services you're borrowing that money for. In the past, when you wanted to borrow money from the PWLB, it was basically a matter of a phone call to an officer at HM Treasury, informing them that you are within your capital financing requirement, you have a borrowing need, it's for capital purposes, and then it was sanctioned and it was signed off within 2 days. Now the requirement going forward, my understanding is that there'll be a lot of questions about what that borrowing is for, and you'll need to provide some detail to explain that and the services that borrowing is to support. And that will, my understanding also is that it will have to be signed off by the Section 151 officer. So the requirement going forward would be a lot more stringent, and so that the PWLB and HM Treasury in particular will understand what is driving that borrowing requirement. So yes, the rules are going to be a lot stricter for borrowing going forward. And if the borrowing is found to be for investing to gain yield, then the PWLB will be within its rights to ask for that money to be paid back, and there may be penalties with it. But in answer to the last question, we can bring back a paper that sets out what those the primary changes are between what we did in the past and what we'll be doing in the future when we come to borrowing.
Thank you. And then if we move on to Paul Zhukowski's question.
Yes, of course.
Looking at Agenda Pack page 129.
Yes.
And it was table, it's 5 in my copy, and item 9.8. It related to the interest rates. And are we locked into interest rates, long-term rates that we can't change? Comments on that, please.
Okay, so table 5, which is the table with reference to the borrowing. This it's made up of 3 types of borrowing: the Public Works Loan Board, which is a subset of HM Treasury, LOBOs and commercial, which are bank loans essentially. The commercial and PWLB loans are all fixed rate loans. They are fixed in duration. They can be broken, but you will incur you can incur premiums for breaking those loans early, similar to a mortgage. If you were to repay your mortgage early, the lender will ask you to pay a form of premium because you're paying back that loan early and they're not getting those interest payments. That premium, it can be a premium, it could be a discount as well. It all depends on the interest rate climate at the time. At the moment, these rates, that the average interest rate that we've got on our borrowing portfolio is high compared to markets, but these are all historical loans. They go back a number of years. They go back prior to my tenure with the County Council, and that's over 10 years. The LOBO loans can be refinanced, and again, we do have conversations with these lenders to try and explore opportunities where we can refinance them, but obviously we're not going to pay excessive premiums to repay these loans. So I hope that answers the question, but we do talk to these lenders and look for opportunities to repay loans. And also we look at the interest rate climate. So if we find that interest rates and the premiums that we'd have to repay to repay those loans are falling, then we will look at opportunities to refinance parts of the borrowing portfolio. But essentially, in the current interest rate climate we're in at the moment, those opportunities are few and far between.
Thank you. And I've noticed that Stephen Pillsworth has his hand up as well. Stephen, did you want to come in and comment on this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. I'm Stephen Pillsworth, Assistant Director of Finance. It was just on the PWLB consultation point, if I could, and specifically the impact on the County Council. Members will hopefully recall that last November, Council approved a commercial investment strategy for the County Council, and we did undertake our first purchase last November off the back of that, a site in Waltham Cross. Once the consultation came out earlier this year, that programme was halted until such time that we had the final position and guidance, which obviously has recently come out, and that effectively stops that proceeding any further. So it closes off those future opportunities to the council. Sharon is quite right. The guidelines as they have been released, if anything, are slightly more draconian than we were perhaps expecting. So, for example, it even closes off councils using proceeds from the sale of some of their sites and assets to invest in commercial property, because that would feature on your capital plan. And the guidance says anywhere in your capital plan is not allowed. Our understanding is that it won't be applied retrospectively, so it won't impact on councils who have already undertaken any commercial investment. It just stops that happening in the future, and I think they'll pick that up from our next submission of a capital plan, which is roughly aligned to our own IP setting. So it's closing off those opportunities. Our initial view is that it shouldn't stop us working with Hearts Living over housing delivery, and that continues to be allowed. And there is a bit of a grey area in the middle where you can use it for regeneration purposes, but there's very little definition on what regeneration is. And I think that might actually take some cases of councils trying to define that and seeing if that's allowed to work that through. So I just wanted to give a bit more background to that rather than wait until the next meeting to give you some of that additional information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And a paper, as Patrick Towie has suggested, I'm not going to put a timescale on it, Patrick, but reasonably soon would be very helpful. Clearly, things are changing very fast at the moment. So thank you for that. So if we then move to item 7, the recommendation is we're invited to note the Treasury Management mid-year report, and we've probably had a longer and better discussion on this than we have on similar items on previous occasions. So can I invite people to vote, please? Nothing's come up on my computer to invite me to. Ah, there we go. And Paul, I've just noticed your hand is still up. I'm assuming it's just because we're voting now. Would you like, that's it. Thanks very much. So while the vote's taking place, I'm turning to item 8, which is on the report pack, page 141. And it's the County Council's anti-fraud progress report.
Good morning, Chair.
I think we probably just have to wait until the vote's agreed, but good morning, Nick. Thank you very much. Nick Jennings, who is Head of Shared Anti-Fraud Service. Right, and that's agreed. Thank you. And Nick, I'm sure you'll use the phrase. I mean, I know the introduction is going to be very short. You're just doing a positional statement, but the fact that the pandemic has created the opportunity for fraud, I thought was a very powerful statement. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Chair. I'm Nick Jennings. I work for the Shared Anti-Fraud Service, as you mentioned, and we provide that counter-fraud function for the County Council, as well as 6 other councils across Hertfordshire and Bedfordshire. If I can just, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bit of a liberty. So my report provides members with a progress in delivering the Council's anti-fraud plan for the current year and the Shared Anti-Fraud Service performance against its KPIs. So I'm going to take it that the members have read the report, but I'm going to jump around some points just to bring to the committee's attention, Chair, if that's okay with you. It should be noted that the report covers a lot of the anti-fraud activity that the Shared Anti-Fraud Service promotes, but there is just as much, if not more, business as usual work undertaken by council officers to help deter and prevent fraud occurring in the first instance. And as we all know, prevention is much better than a cure. So my report can be found at page 141 of the bundle. Appendix A, 151, is the plan for this year. I don't intend to comment on the plan itself because committee members saw and approved this earlier this year. And the SAS KPIs can be found at page 161, which is Appendix B. Quick apology for all the acronyms. More than happy to go through any questions that members might have about some of those. We're fairly poor in my particular area at using acronyms and just expecting everybody else to understand them. So apologies for that. But I'm pleased to advise members that all of the KPIs for the Shared Anti-Fraud Service are on target to be met this year. If I can just touch very, very briefly on the COVID pandemic and just our response to that. Members previously have raised the issue of those new and emerging fraud threats relating to the pandemic, and may recall from my previous report this year that much of the delivery of our business as usual activities under review at the moment for obvious reasons. Certain parts of the service, such as face-to-face meetings, interviews, training, remain largely suspended or being delivered in slightly different formats as we find our way into what the future holds. But we're still able to provide a good response to those threats as they arise, and that's included the work that we've done, a large amount of work that we've done with the districts and borough councils around the grant schemes that they dealt with earlier on this year. And although we've come across a number of suspicious or potentially fraudulent grant applications, district teams have done an excellent job in delivering those schemes and ensuring that fraud is prevented, or where it's identified, it's swiftly reported into SAFs. We've provided much more detail around enhanced alerts that we're coming across. In fact, just this morning, we sent an alert across to officers at the council about mainly financial matters that have been reported by the Credit Industry Fraud Avoidance Service, but particularly around COVID and non-COVID related scams, phishing emails, not just being seen in the UK, but internationally as well, so we can learn about what's going on abroad and make sure we sort of build management and mitigation of those risks into our systems as well. We're still seeing phishing emails being sent to local residents, either sending from the council or other authorities within the county, or indeed the government as well. And we work very, very closely with HCC Trading Standards and Herts Police on sharing intelligence and knowledge to protect local residents and visitors as well. And just quite literally, whilst this meeting's been going on, I've received an email from Owl Watch, which is what the police use for businesses, for a scheme which is being run by HCC Trading Standards. It's a free cyber learning event run by Trading Standards and the police in partnership. So that's really, really good to see that happening as well. We continue to report all phishing, scams, spam emails. They're all going to the National Cyber Security Centre as well as we reported to CIFAS and Action Fraud. So we're trying to keep on top of those new things as we see them, because they quite often can take us by surprise if we don't share that intelligence across other organisations we work with. If I can just turn to page 145, section 2.4 of my report. We mentioned the number of staff working for the county council at the moment. Mentioned that we have recruited 2 additional staff recently. It's mentioned later in my report as well. This is part of the Invest to Transform project, which has support from Director of Resources and AD Finance. So I have to thank personally for getting this matter sorted out, getting this project rolling. We've brought in 1 officer to look at fraud risks specifically within children's services. That work's already commenced. It's got the full support of the Children's Services Director and the core board. And a 2nd officer we brought in to look at the improved use of data analytics to help us identify fraud and error in council tax discount schemes operating across the county. And that particular scheme is a piece of work and that project as the support of the Herts CFO group. And we've recently, in fact, again, just this morning, heard back from the revenues and benefits managers for all 10 authorities who are keen to support that work as well. So that's really positive. I'm going to harp on about some of the work the team's doing as well, because I think it's really important that members know this. I'm going
to ask if you can keep it quite short.
Yeah,
Nick,
I am. I just want to pick up these just put a bit of body really on the content of the report, meat on the bones, as it were. We've got an accredited financial investigator who works as part of our intelligence team. That officer recently had a case reported to her that was identified by officers working in HCC Finance. There was an attempt to defraud the authority of just over £1 million. As a result of officers spotting that fraud before it happened, we prevented that fraud going ahead. And as a result of that, we've identified a number of mule bank accounts that are linked to an organised crime group. We've now been able to freeze those accounts, and that matter has been reported to the relevant banking and enforcement agencies. So I think it's just really important that members know that sort of the level and detail of work, the fact that we don't work in isolations within the service. And just finally, I just wanted to reiterate that, although this report comes from me as the head of Shared Anti-Fraud Service, we work with a number of HCC services. We work with partners outside the authority as well. And it really is a joined up approach in the work that we do for the authority. I'll stop rambling at that point, Chair. I'm more than happy to take any questions that members might have.
Thank you. And I'm going to invite Matt to turn off his audio thing. so that we can all pick up everything that this is Matt out now. Matt, thank you very much. Nick, thank you very much. Comprehensive report. Difficult to quantify the amount of money that you save the council, because if you stop a fraud before it happens, how do we measure the benefit to us? I think we all know the benefit is absolutely huge. Thank you for emphasising again that you work with across all of our departments, but also nationally. We all noted Blue Badge, I'm sure, is still the biggest area. Adult ACS is also a problem. A plea to staff and the general public, please keep reporting the fraud. Please keep reporting them. And I'm looking at hands up. William Wyatt Lowe. William, would you like to come in?
Yes, I found out recently that the level of false furlough claims nationally has been rocketing. Are you involved in any way in picking up false furlough claims, and or is there any assistance that you can give to the national effort?
The furlough claims themselves is a national scheme. We have been approached by HMRC via LGA to support them where we can. So if they were to make inquiries about a specific incidence of furlough fraud, then certainly we would assist with that and work with our local authorities to make sure we provide any information which would assist them.
Thank you very much. And I think on that note, we thank you very much, Nick, as ever. We thank you and your team for everything you do. Again, the fire service keeps us safe. You keep us safe too. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
As do all of the finance team, of course, but thank you very much for what you do. So can we now all vote, please? And what are we voting on? Oh, we're reviewing the progress, we're agreeing that, and we're reviewing the performance of the key against key indicators. And while the voting is taking place, I'm turning the page now to item number 9, which is the shared internal audit progress report, and that is on agenda pack page 163. And item 8 was agreed. Thank you very much indeed. So, SIAS internal audit progress report. Darren Williams is going to introduce this to us.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll try and keep it as high level as I can. So this is the standard report that we submit to the committee. It's based on the revised internal audit plan approved in October 2020. Just really gives you an update on final reports issued, new limited assurance opinions or high priority recommendations in the period, results of our follow-up process for Q3 on outstanding recommendations, performance figures against KPIs, and we've also just included something on really just advising the committee on the revised approach that we're considering for audit planning for 21-22. What I just wanted to do was just give the committee a couple of updates on the report, because we've just basically managed to get a bit more information on follow-ups since the report was published. So if I just draw the committee's attention to Appendix C, page 192, which is where we provide the recommendations follow-ups for outstanding medium priority recommendations over 12 months overdue. It's really just to give the committee an update on 2 of those. On page 192, we have recommendation 1, which is on the LEP. That's due for implementation by the 31st of December. That related to end of project reports, providing a clear indication as to whether project aims and objectives have been delivered. And I can confirm that we've checked with the LEP, and they have said basically that a revised form will be circulated to the LEP executive team for review this week. Will be discussed at the agenda on the next operations team meeting next week, and subject to any comments, it's anticipated that that will be implemented by the end of December.
Thank you.
On page 194, recommendation 3, which is the 0 to 25 Together service. This one was around assessment waiting lists. That's now implemented. We've checked with the 0 to 25 Together service, and we're satisfied that appropriate management information is provided, and all team managers have received training on how they should be using such information. So it was just an update on those. And then I just wanted to take the committee back to page 175, paragraph 2.20. And this was just in relation to a query that we had during the briefing sessions, and it's in relation to high priority recommendations relating to schools, which we don't currently report in detail in a progress report. That's primarily due to the volume and the lower risk because it relates to a single school, and that we actually only undertake the follow-ups once a year in the autumn term. However, I will just provide the committee, if I'm able to, with a very quick update in relation to this. So the school's follow-up covers themes is covering themes undertaken in 2018-19, which was the school's financial value standard and general data protection regulations, and in 2019-20, the themes on schools financial value standard again and medium-term financial planning. The schools that we follow up are those who have received high priority recommendations and or limited assurance opinions. A total of 16 schools are being followed up within this process. 8 of those schools receive limited assurance opinions. In total, there are 60 recommendations that are being followed up. 23 of those are high priority and 37 are medium priority. In terms of the high priorities, 12 of those relate to medium-term financial planning or budget monitoring. This isn't probably unexpected due to the financial pressures that have been facing schools for a number of years, but these recommendations were really driving at schools undertaking key early work to manage future planned deficits within their medium-term financial plans. But it should be noted that in terms of the risk, schools are not allowed to plan for or submit deficit budgets, and the school funding unit or finance robustly assess all budgets being submitted, and will obviously challenge schools should the financial position look unsustainable. At the current point, as I say, the follow-ups in progress. At the current point, 14 out of the 23 high priority recommendations have been confirmed as complete based on the follow-ups undertaken so far. So I just thought it was useful to give the committee just a slight update, a bit of context around that particular thing. We will be looking in future at how we report those going forward.
Thank you very much for that. So quite a lot in there. I'm sure we all noted on the table of outstanding medium risk reports, quite a lot of those had a reprogrammed a deadline of the 31st of December. And thank you for drawing to our attention progress on 2 of those, but obviously in the next audit committee, we'll be looking to see how many of those 31st December ones were done on time. On schools, you've just given us a lot of data. Now, my recollection is that you're pulling together a report on this. I think it would be helpful if that data, updated obviously, were included, because I don't think we were in a position to take all of that down and absorb the impact of what you were saying. So something in writing about that, hopefully early in the new year, would help bring us up to date with that. Thank you very much. And I've got one other comment as well. I was very interested in Agenda Pack page 174, which is item 2.14, when you've drawn to our attention, the pressures that COVID has brought on the internal audit team, and the fact that you've had to vary the programme we agreed last year to take account of the situation, and the fact that you're looking for, I think you described it as moving to a dynamic audit planning approach for next year. So looking at some, picking off the outstanding matters, picking off those on the reserve list that have moved to the top, reflecting the current situation, but it gives you more flexibility during the course of the year. And that struck me as actually really sensible. So thank you for drawing that to our attention. So I've done too much talking. Everyone will agree with that. Let's go back to the beginning of this agenda item. I haven't seen any. Yes, I have. John Hale. John, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Chair. And just really to pick up on your last comment, I think the plan to move to a more dynamic planning process, especially for the next year, 18 months, is going to be important, because I think we're going to see a lot of changes. Some we can foresee, some we can't. And I think something that's more responsive will be a good move. So I'm supportive of that.
Thank you. Very helpful. it's a comprehensive report, so I see no other comments, hands up, so I'm going to suggest we move straight to voting on this. And the voting is to note the internal audit progress report and note the progress update on the implementation status of outstanding high priority recommendations, etc. And again, while voting is taking place, I'm now turning to item 10, which is Agenda Pack page 197. And it's the Risk Management Update Report. And I think it's Fiona Timms, who's going to be introducing this. And I know Peter Stanley's been very involved in preparing the report as well.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Can you just hang on? I'm not sure that we've agreed the previous item, and I think technically we probably just need to do that. Oh, brilliant. It's agreed. Fiona Timms, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your patience. Over to you.
Okay, this is a quick summary of the changes that are highlighted in the report. Overall, there have been 4 changes to highlight to the committee. 2 changes have been made to the strategic risks and 2 to the corporate risks. There is a new, or what has been termed escalated strategic risk, which relates to children's services, and this is code number SCS08, and that refers to the a potential spike in referrals to the service, and also the difficulties facing the service due to court backlogs and the impact that is having on the service overall. The second change to strategic risks is for SR31. And that is about Libraries for Life and mobilisation, and that reflects an increase in the likelihood of failing to mobilise Libraries for Life in time for a 1st of April 2021 start for them. There are 2 changes to corporate risks. AC12, which is about the failure of care providers. We've actually reduced the likelihood of that risk now, following the additional support that's been provided both by HCC and by the government in terms of the 3 PPE that they provided to undercare homes. CSO4, however, is showing an increase in likelihood, and that's due to potential increase in families becoming homeless. And again, that's a children's services risk, and it's about the provision that they have to make for families becoming homeless within the Hertfordshire. So overall, that's sort of the key highlights to the report, and I just really need obviously the audit committee as well to discuss what the risk focus report is required for March meeting.
Thank you, Fiona. May I ask you a particular question? I always try and look at the score that officers have decided, having reviewed everything, to allocate. And then I try and look at the target score. And if we are living with the risk as best we can, my understanding from officers is that they've reviewed it very carefully, they're keeping an eye on it. And whilst nobody likes risk, obviously, but that seems to be what I'm going to call as stable a situation as we can have. But then when I see the risk has rocketed and is significantly above the target score, I feel officers are trying to tell us something. And that is my concern about SCS08, which you mentioned. It's down as strategic escalated, and I'm on Agenda Pack page 201. It's the 3rd on the strategic risk column. To have a score that's gone up to 32, where the target score was just 16, what are officers trying to tell us here?
Okay, well, I believe that obviously there's this potential spike in children's services. We've got issues to ensure that the resources are in place to deal with any such spike. So there are concerns that they will be able to deal with them in an appropriate manner within the right time frames. Obviously, I'm sure that Matt could help me with that one. And also, obviously, we've got pressures coming through from the fact that the courts are no longer or there's a big backlog in the courts, so we have problems with children that may have been coming out of the care system actually still remaining in the care system because of that backlog. But that's what I believe they're trying to say, that they have a concern about the pressures on their service, largely coming through from COVID-19.
Thank you. Heard loud and clear. Thank you for that. I haven't seen any other hands coming up. Sharon Taylor. Sharon.
Thank you, Chair. And it relates to the comments you've just made around SCS08. We've heard in other places, including the Resources Board, about the great pressure that our children's services teams are under, and I fear that may be a kind of tip of the iceberg thing. We certainly have seen during the COVID crisis that there was, particularly while the children were out of school, which is why I'm glad they're back now, that the usual checks and balances in the system were not there, and now that they're back at school, hopefully things will be picked up, but they may be there may be a backlog of things that are going to present us with greater issues going forward. And we have seen children's services making huge efforts to deal with budget deficits, and we know there were significant budget issues last year in children's services. And while I think the increased risk on this is absolutely right to be flagged up, I do think it's a big issue that, from the I know we're not a children's committee, we're an audit committee, so we're there to recognise the risk, but this could potentially be worse. And I think the other thing that is not shown in this risk is that the huge increase in domestic abuse cases that we're all seeing across the county, 90% increase in referrals, does have a knock-on effect into children's services too. So I think the increased risk in this area is very key, and I think we need to keep a very close eye on that. I'm grateful to you for highlighting it, Chair, because I do think it's something that we'll want to watch as we go further into the year.
Well, I'm having given this thought over the last 24 hours as well, particularly having had officer advice in my briefing. I think I'm going to propose that this is the one that we review as our risk focused report for the next committee, because I don't think we can afford not to review this one. It's almost a negative, we, as an audit committee, we cannot be seen to be ignoring what officers are deliberately drawing to our attention. If it's causing them concern, then we need to go into this a bit more. But Tim, I see you've got your hand up. Tim.
Thank you very much, Francis. It's sort of reiterating what you picked out, Francis, and what Sharon sort of reiterated as well. I also noted down on when I read this report, the SCS 081, the spike in children's services referrals. I also linked it in with SC 04, the families becoming homeless. I see both of them are quite linked, as well as domestic abuse. It's highlighting the pressures that basically families could be facing over the coming months, coming years, because of the long-lasting impacts of COVID after the medical side gets resolved, really, the job side, the financial pressures. And I would also think that basically it's what risk reports are all about, really. It's what the officers are picking up, highlighting it to us to see if we can address it. Yes, and I would base. Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, I can't see any other hands up, so I'm going to suggest that we look at the recommendations on this one, and the recommendations are that the changes and updates be noted, that the risk management report be noted, and that we identify the risk to be reviewed as part of the risk focused report next time. Are we content that that should be SCS 08, and we're going to ask officers if they can try to make sure that within that risk focused report there's a little paragraph which cross-references to domestic abuse and cross-references to homelessness. I mean, I'm sure it would anyway, but if we can try and pick that up as maybe as a contributing factor, I think that would probably be quite helpful. So oh, Matt, I'm so sorry. Yes, you've been sitting there very patiently, and I know the involvement that you've had for this as well. So if I'm actually going to invite members to vote on that and on SCS 08 with those little paragraph bits added. So could we vote? And then while we're voting, and we can't move into this until we're ready, until the voting has happened, but I'm sure we're all desperately turning to page Agenda Pack 221, Agenda Item 11, which is the Risk Focus Report, the Recovery from COVID-19. And Scott Crudgington is going to be here for this, but Matt, thank you for introducing yourself as well. Not Ed Knowles, who we had originally thought might be coming, but Matt Ansell is going to be presenting this as well. So item 10 is agreed. Thank you for that confirmation. And we're delighted to introduce Scott Crudgington, who I think is going to introduce this. Yeah, Scott is the Director of Resources for the County Council.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. So just to give you a sort of an overview of what the risk focus report is covering, and I've got to say, when we were set this task by the Audit Committee in terms of how we could best sort of analyse the assurance framework, the governance that has all been in place over almost 9 months now, if not more. You know, it was where do you stop? And what you'll probably see here in this report, there is lots of things that we cover, but I'm sure you'll also be aware of other areas that we seek assurance from, and I'm more than happy either through myself, Matt, or also Anna Morrison that's on the call as well, as part of our recovery effort to be able to answer those questions. And probably my sort of first comment to make is that a pandemic is different in relation to how you now set up your governance and assurance frameworks. That if you were in a sort of a major incident, you know, sort of, God forbid, you know, the equivalence of Buncefield all of those years ago, or unfortunately sort of things like the Hatfield rail crash, that there was, you know, the organisation goes into an emergency mode, and then it's relatively short-lived. Whilst you're in that emergency mode, you divert a lot of effort for a short period of time, and then you move back to some form of normal operation. But due to sort of the scale, the severity and the duration of this pandemic, it has meant that we've needed to put in much longer lasting governance and assurance frameworks during that period. So what we've needed to do, we've almost had to work with members in working on the basis of under the sort of impression of executive has permission. And really that is on the basis that, you know, the officers need to make decisions, but obviously make sure there's full transparency in those decisions, and that we report back, that we check in with whether it be portfolio holders or appropriate members when we feel that sort of material decisions are being taken. That could be in terms of pound notes, it could be in relation to impact or potential risk as well. So in terms of how we sort of now moved into that model, that what we've needed to do is put in effectively safety valves in the system, and that we have every week we have 3 meetings of our SMB, which is effectively just focusing on the COVID response. There are departmental meetings 3 weekly also, in terms of making sure that all the issues that the departments are considering and what they need to escalate up to the management board are being considered. We have the strategic coordinating group that looks across the whole of Hertfordshire and all the public sector services within that system, that is chaired by our very own Daryl Keane that you referred to earlier in the meeting. And then we have our incident management team that really focuses on how the organisation needs to respond. And that's very much, in this case at the moment, is Matt's responsibility to be leading that. And we've also put in place very sort of specific lead officers for key programs, whether it's the mass vaccination sites where we've got Taryn Pearson-Rose, whether it's been in relation to the Shield and the which also Taryn was involved in, but also led by Kirsty Facker, and then all of the response to the volunteering, the massive volunteering effort that we've seen that's come over the horizon up to both the district councils and the county councils in lending their support to the responses. So as far as this report's concerned, I won't go much further other than probably to take questions from you, Chair, is that that we draw on assurance and comfort in relation to the arrangements that we're putting in place for a whole host of methods, but it's probably that strategic agile overview that we're taking place 2, 3, 4 times a week, that we make sure that we're keeping on top of the issues faced. But it's pretty easy if I hand back to you, Chair, and we can take more questions, and that will probably bring out the key issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. And I think I should be wrapping my own knuckles, because I did say that after 2 hours we needed a quarter of an hour break. Now, my instinct, but I'm not prepared to break the audit rules, my instinct is to carry on. But I've had a little note to say we should go for a break, and I'm happy to take people's comments on this. If we carry on, are we breaking any rules, officers?
As far if I can help, Chair, certainly, but based on what I'm advised, it's some protocols that have now been sort of considered by the group leaders, and it's sort of just accepted practice that we work to basis. But it's very much up to the committee to decide if they wish to carry on since we're on the final item, or we can break and I can come back and answer your questions after.
I've got 3, 4, carry on please, continue, I reckon, we're not breaking any rules, continue, carry on please. Brilliant, I'm going to suggest that we carry on. Scott, your introduction was very helpful, and I know if we had a break now, heaven forbid for 15 minutes, lovely idea, but no, we might lose some of the salient points. I picked up that you said that Matt Ansell, who's joined us, is leading on how, I think you said, how management should respond, which I think is very helpful. You commented on Taryn Rose Pearson on the vaccination sites and the shielding, and that's very interesting. The strategic agile overview, I just love the idea that we've all become agile. I had an interesting conversation as well, as ever, with, I think it was Stephen Pillsworth in my briefing, who said one of his particular concerns were not so much the finance, but actually it was the resources, having the people with the skills and the qualifications and the qualities. I mean, you can use volunteer. I mean, how we relied on volunteers as a community, but we need the training and we need the qualified staff to do the really important stuff. So a fascinating report, and I had John Hale's hand came up first, and then Sharon Taylor's. So perhaps John, over to you first, please.
Thank you, Chair. And Scott, thank you very much for both a very informative report and a brief summary of it. One of the issues here, actually, I think we need to consider is both the response and how the council is managing the current environment, and then also, you know, let's assume that we come Easter next year, maybe the autumn. The pandemic, we've learnt how to live with the pandemic. We're into what might be called a steady state.
Yeah.
I don't know what that steady state will be, but there will be potentially an economic downturn or similar issues that we need to leave to. What controls, what processes has the council got in where you are looking forward to, you know, 6 months' time? How will the council manage then if, say, the economy has shrunk by 5% in Hertfordshire, and at any one time we're having to work on the assumption of having 1% of our staff out because of COVID-related illness?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Councillor. So yeah, the way that we're now planning for the future is the way that we've effectively separated our officer effort is that we've got a large proportion of that focusing on the issues of today and responding to the challenges of the pandemic. But we also have a team that's being led by Anna Morrison that is focusing on almost beyond the pandemic, or certainly into next year. And it's her job to lead a group of officers across the whole organisation that is focusing on the way that we return to work, effectively our new operating model for the council, and we expect that it won't be like it was before, and it won't be like it is today, but we're going to find some sweet spot in between those sort of two ways of working. But there's been other work streams under sort of Anna's original remit, which we've separated off to some degree, and maybe that may be a point and recommendation we could come back to, is around the role of working very closely with our LEP in picking up your issue about the performance of the economy. As the furlough schemes start to sort of wind down, and now businesses have to make those sort of very difficult decisions in relation to the future of their business, and therefore maybe unemployment that will then follow. So it's really our role with the county council is working very closely with the LEP and also our districts and boroughs to really find how we're getting good quality data coming through, understanding whether there is a need for sort of sizable sort of retraining, reskilling programs that really local government would be here to support and develop. So yeah, so that's the way I would describe it. At the moment, we've got a lot of people worrying about the issues today, but let me give you confidence. There are people working on the different work streams about what next year is about, and that is the benefit of an organisation this size, that we've been able to separate that effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Sharon Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. And I suppose this risk report is unusual in the sense that it's largely controlled by outside factors, and the fact that the risk rating has risen so dramatically is to do with the uncertainties that to some extent we can manage the risk, but they're not always. Literally with this pandemic, we haven't known from one week to the next what's going to happen, and what the financial and resource implications and impacts are going to be. So it's unusual in that sense, and I think Scott was right to pick that up. I've got a couple of fairly specific questions, Chair. One was around as we move on from what's been a very good process, I think, in Hertfordshire, of very cooperative and partnership approach to managing the pandemic. We're going into another phase of it now, where the NHS have much more control over what's going on because of the vaccination programme, and I just wondered what Scott's assessment of how that might impact on the very tight processes we've had throughout the last 9 months of managing and working together jointly, which I think have been incredibly effective in Hertfordshire, and talking to partners elsewhere, it makes me even more convinced that's worked very well here. So, but obviously, as we go into the vaccination phase, that's much more in the control of the NHS, and while we would hope they would operate within our structures, that may or may not be the case. And the second one is around the economic shocks related in some ways, Chair, to the previous item, where we were looking at risks to specific service areas, which as the economic impact, and there is a kind of perfect storm coming up of Brexit, COVID, and the recessionary impact, long-term recessionary impact of COVID. Our straightforward ability to manage the service pressures and to manage a situation where there may be increasing numbers of people who just aren't able to pay their council tax, how we're going to deal with those. So I'd be grateful for Scott's thoughts on those.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the issue of sort of this almost like this new set of relationships that in terms of the pandemic that need now building on, particularly with our health partners, it's come to the fore over the last couple of weeks that if I had to transplant myself out of the county council and place myself in Herts Community Trust shoes, that I would know that there will be an absolute sort of need to focus on getting ourselves ready for the vaccination programme that is as we've heard on the news today, is launching today. But I suppose the need for us is to make sure that we're involving the likes of local government in making sure that the solution will be us all working collectively together and keeping each other informed and being able to support each other. And I think that has happened at many levels, but I think that certainly the way that we now go out and communicate with our public, and that won't just be about the encouragement of making sure that people get their vaccines, but also sometimes in terms of leaders like Sharon within their town are able to be well informed of the sort of challenges that may come back from their public, where there's going to be probably quite a bit of disruption within the town as these sort of things start to take place. So we need us all work, advocating the role of both local government and health working hand in hand. So I would personally, I'll be promoting that the Hertfordshire Community Trust should become heavily involved with the local outbreak management board that is represented by all leaders within the county, to become a sort of an equal voice within that group, to make sure that their issues are understood by local leaders and vice versa, that HCT can hear directly from us in terms of what our challenges are. And I think through that dialogue and that communication, that will serve us well into the future and the challenges that we're clearly going to face over the coming months. In terms of economic shocks, the issues, I suppose this is multifaceted, and again, I think the role and the key role that the LEP are going to play in helping the Hertfordshire economy sort of survive or respond to the economic shocks that are about to come are going to be absolutely essential. And from my point of view, I would be looking and wanting assurances from the Chief Executive and Chairman of the LEP that they have the sufficient capacity to be able to manage that response, just as much as both districts and the county council have needed to consider their capacity. But then bringing it to the issues of council tax, I would see that we are having to sort of make assessments about what the overall tax yield is going to be this year and next year and beyond, of which will have quite a dramatic impact on each of our finances in the local government. But my view would be is making sure that, again, that we collectively promote and encourage the take up of the appropriate benefits and the council tax support schemes that exist within the system for those that are there for the exact reasons when people fall on hard times for whatever that reason may be, and a pandemic is just as good a reason as any. They should be making sure that what support is there and not feel sort of, I don't know, embarrassed by going forward to ask for that support. That's exactly why those systems are there for, and as a result of having that access to that support will mean that our council tax will be appropriately collected. Thank you, Chair.
Gosh, what an interesting range of comments there. Paul Zhukowski, I've got you next. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. The question that I've got, there's two components to it, really. The first is that, as I understand it, the risk score that we've got for this particular item is after the controls are implemented. But we are seeing a score that is extraordinarily high in 48, even after what I would say is a relatively comprehensive set of controls. The question, I suppose, that comes out of that is, are those controls appropriate? Do they go far enough? Are we short on some of the controls? Should we not be putting more in to try and bring that risk level further down? And going into those risks, it then triggers the second question, because number 3 on that list, from lessons learned, modelling what a second peak would look like for all services. Well, we're clearly now at the point where we're past that, or we appear to be past that second peak. So was our modelling good? Did that control work effectively? Could we have some assurance that actually, in the grand scheme of things, those controls were right and were delivering a significant reduction in the overall risk?
Thank you, Councillor. So, yes, probably the best way to answer this in terms of could we implement more controls. I think there's a real fine balance that you've got to sort of pull off here. That if we end up implementing more and more controls and checks and balances, what you then start to find is you start to then lock the system up, and this agile decision making, this sort of decision making that is then sort of reported up on an exception based on materiality, etc., more things start to then get drawn up towards sort of higher levels within the organization. So you start making decision at the probably its highest point within the organization, and I would absolutely suggest that is not good for our response for the pandemic. It's proven the need for this more sort of flexible way of making decisions, and decisions being made at the right point within the organisation has been really effective. So what that then starts so I don't believe that there is further controls that we should be implementing. I accept that the score remains high even after mitigation, but that is, as I think Councillor Taylor referred to earlier, is more of a product of the external influences and impacts that we face as an organisation, rather than those that I believe that we can control just through actions of our own. In terms of then, what does the second peak tell us, and did we learn from the first peak, and does the second peak now did the sort of our concerns and the controls we put in place really come to fruition? Well, there was a couple of issues that we were planning for. A 25% level of absenteeism amongst our staff, either because of impacts of the illness, or because there could have been issues related to school closures or businesses that have to shut down because they've become because the pandemic has impacted and become prevalent within their organisation. Well, we haven't seen those levels of staff absenteeism. If anything, we're seeing very low levels of absenteeism. So there is more staff within the organisation than we were anticipating. But probably the biggest single issue that I think the chair picked up on her opening comments was that in the first peak, we had the benefit of the redeployment hub that's referred to in the report. We were able to redeploy a lot of staff that really services that we shut down. Sizable amounts of staff from our library service were redeployed, as one example, to different parts of the organisation to help the pandemic effort. We haven't seen that this time, and very few of our services have either been pulled back or stopped in their entirety. So therefore, our biggest challenge has been that sort of release of and finding the capacity, and almost a need for recruiting at speed to make sure that we've got sufficient capacity to meet all of the needs across our different services. So probably just best to summarise that I don't believe that there are more controls that need to be implemented, and that score will remain high because of external factors. And the second peak, there's been some good news and some bad news. Some good news that we haven't seen the levels of staff absenteeism, but on the downside, we haven't got necessarily the capacity to be able to divert round to other parts of the organisation that we had in the first phase.
And I'm just going to add to that, Paul, it was a helpful question. I flicked back to the previous agenda item, and I'm looking at Appendix A, Agenda Pack, page 212, which sets out in detail each of the control measures that the officers across the whole County Council have put in place in order to manage this risk. And I think that's quite a helpful little pointer there. John Hale next. John.
Yes, thank you. And thanks, Scott, for that very informative response to Paul's question, which I wanted to follow up on. And also to Francis, I'd also been looking at these controls. And for instance, looking at a lot of these controls, we've got it in this, the control is in place and ongoing. And Scott has said that you think you have got all the controls that are practical to put in place. And therefore my question is, at the moment, I think we have a current risk score of 48, which is based on a probability of 3 and an impact of very high.
Yep.
But somebody has said we should have a target of 24, same probability, but an impact of 8. Now, if we've got all the controls we think are practical in place, how are we going to ever get the target risk score down to 24? Or are we just really managing our risk at managing the outfall of the risk at 48, and we need to revise our documentation to say, well, actually 48 is the target for this. It is so significant, that is it.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, apologies. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. So yeah, that's a very good challenge, and I think that we need to the aim by putting in the mitigation measures should be able to get us to 24. The score still remains high because of the different phases and the fast-moving nature of the issues that we're facing. I think that we have to be realistic in terms of through the challenges that we've put in place in terms of being open to scrutiny, both from a scrutiny point of view, an audit committee point of view, regular reports into cabinet, etc. That I'm quite content with the level of control and that we're putting in place. So I think there is a need to look at that target score to see whether it is feasible to be achieved with the external factors and the fast-moving nature of this pandemic on the way that we are operating, and come back with a revised recommendation if that's considered to be appropriate. But at the moment, I'm quite comfortable. Well, sorry, I'm comfortable with the accuracy of the score. I'm not comfortable where it is because I would obviously love to see it reduce. And over time, as I think you referred to earlier, Councillor, about as we start to move into more of the vaccination program starting to be rolled out in more volumes over the new year, I would start to expect us to return to some form of normality, even though it may be a bit different than how we experienced life before the pandemic. But I would hope we would start to see the scores start to return to those levels at that point.
It's an interesting point, isn't it? Some time back now, we reviewed how risks are calculated, and it was this team. Now, I know there have been changes in the audit committee since this cycle of the council, but it was this audit committee in the last 3.5 years that specifically asked that we should include a column for target score, because otherwise we didn't know where we were in terms of what was the risk we were forced to accept, because you can never eliminate risk, and which ones there was an opportunity to improve things. So it may be, in the fullness of time, I'm certainly not suggesting this in the next few weeks, that a little seminar or a discussion on how target scores are calculated might be interesting looking forward. On this particular risk, did I mishear? I thought the target score for this one is 32. It's not 24, it's 32. So yes, we're not there, we're above target score. That's why we wanted to call it in, if that's the right phrase. Probably not this time, but this is a very helpful conversation, I think. Now, I think it was Paul I had next. Paul Zhukowski, your hand's gone down. Maybe I imagine that. John, it wasn't, it was John Graham. John, I saw your hand, but you're not on my screen anymore.
Yes, that's okay. Chairman, I was going to comment on how right we were to select this risk for the deep dive, but obviously things have moved on, and it is a moving feast, as Scott has explained to us. But I think we've had a very good presentation from Scott, and shows the importance that the council are placing on this particular risk. And I pulled my hand down because the comments and the questions that have come forward, I think, have demonstrated that this is we've explored this area more thoroughly than I think might have been expected simply by reading the report. So I think I think the debate's been excellent, and it shows two things. It shows, one is the council is paying a lot of attention to this, but I think as an audit committee we've done our challenge on the council to make sure this risk is being properly explored and managed. Thank you.
I think you're right. I think it's our duty to make sure that we are satisfied that the processes our officers have in place are as good as they can be, and that we are trying to keep an overview. I don't want to promote further discussion, but I am going to say it wouldn't surprise me if we get another little peak after the Christmas New Year period, because waves tend not to disappear completely. So I'm sure the officers will be, looking for that and keeping an eye on it. If we've got no other comments coming forward, John, your hand is still up, but I'm assuming it should have gone down again. John Graham, not John Hale. I think we should look at the recommendation. So we're noting, commenting on, and endorsing the overall approach. Can I invite people to vote on that, please? And we're just waiting for the voting. There we go. Thank you. And while we're just waiting for that to come through, there's no other Part 1 business. There's no Part 2 business. We've agreed, I think, we probably need formally to agree the future work programme, even though we've discussed it and we've agreed which risk is going to come forward next time. So can we now formally agree the future work programme as discussed, which is under item 12? And while votes on that are coming through, I do apologise. It was obviously my enthusiasm to carry on and to get to one of our key reports. And I was listening very carefully, Scott, to what you were saying, and I hadn't realised the passage of time. But there it goes. It flies when you're having fun, doesn't it? So I'm sorry, everybody, we didn't get a break. I'm particularly sorry for the officers, because it's very hard for them to creep out and get another cup of coffee or something, or if they're thirsty, whereas members can judge their time a little more easily in that respect. So officers, thank you for your stamina, and good, that item has been agreed. So thank you all very much. And I've just remembered I was going to wear my Christmas sweater and I didn't, so never mind. Last meeting before Christmas. Merry Christmas, everybody, and best wishes for 2021 for all of us and everybody listening. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, officers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well,
Good afternoon.
Bye, everyone.
Francis.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.